were not in any way Christian textbooks. They were secular textbooks that assumed certain philosophical viewpoints that I would identify as humanistic in reference to a lack of any reference or acceptance of or anything of a deity in any way, shape, or form. And so I would just say, hey, go in and look at the textbooks yourself. If this is just a semantic problem, well, fine. But I think as you and I understand, and I'm assuming you're a Christian, as you and I would understand it, yes, the humanism is definitely there. If you want to define it out of there, that's fine. But as far as you and I are concerned as Christians, yes, it's definitely there.
I'd also like to respond to that and say that whether or not you choose to accept biology, biology is a fact. We are biological organisms. We do function according to the same general rules, I guess you could say, that all other animal life on Earth does. We metabolize our food the same way all other animals do. We synthesize proteins basically the same way all other animals do. Our gene structure might be a little different, and our phenotypical manifestation may be a little different on Earth, but I think that to go back to what this other caller was trying to say before, while some things are taken as assumptions and we're gathering data to prove it, we're also willing to say that we do not have all the answers, and this is the thing that the religious person cannot deal with. Psychologically, they're not prepared to say, I don't know, but I think this, or I don't know, but there's circumstantial evidence that seems to establish this, and instead of doing that, they will say, well, I'm too intellectually lazy to go out and get the real answers, so I will just say that God did it and try to make everybody else believe this, and if I can get enough people to believe this, then it will be accepted as true. And this is not the way that atheists and most of the humanists I'm familiar with operate. A humanist or an atheist will simply say, this is what we know, this is what these facts seem to imply, and here's an experiment to test it, now let's see if we can do this. 100 years ago, it was considered absolutely impossible for a heavier-than-air craft to fly, and yet today we know, because they weren't using the best of mechanical devices, because they didn't have as good an understanding of the principles of aerodynamics, because they didn't really look at what it would take to get these things off the ground, they couldn't do it. Today we can do it because we do understand the principles of aerodynamics and so on better.
Obviously, I do not function as a Christian the way that Mr. Lynch just described Christians as functioning, and so I would say that's just obviously not true in reference, at least to myself.
I got to take a break here. We're going to come back with Brian Lynch of the American Atheist Center, Jim White of Alpha and Omega Ministries. Back to the phones. This is Steve in Tempe, a first-time caller to FYI Radio. Hello, Steve.
Hi.
Yes.
I'd like to address my question to Mr. Lynch.
Go ahead.
Since it is a fact that the documents exist, and a demonstrable fact, the documents exist as to the existence of Jesus Christ, the man, from both sympathetic and hostile sources, I'm wondering what criteria Mr. Lynch uses to decide which of these documents that they are going to adhere to and which they're going to throw out the door.
Well,
can you answer that, Mr. Lynch?
Yeah, as I said, what they refer to is bodies of believers who followed teachers or who followed cult leaders, and they don't make any specific reference to any person.
I would disagree with that, since there also are eyewitness accounts included in those documents.
No, there aren't eyewitness accounts. I think we have to recognize that the Bible was known to be an apocryphal set of documents when, not the Bible, I'm sorry, the Gospels were known to be apocryphal even as early as about 200 A.D.
Could you provide a documentation for that, please?
Yeah, the Bible, the documents were not actually written in a form that is familiar to us until, at least 75 or 88 A.D. in their current form, and as late as 160 A.D. So obviously, none of the people who wrote these things could possibly have been alive when this person Jesus was around. In any case, I think that it is very obvious, as I said before, that these documents and these works were compiled from sources that predated them by as much as 150 to 200 years.
Steve, I need to respond to that.
Go ahead, I would like you to.
You keep saying it's obvious, Brian, and I asked for documentation. I am very familiar with the history of the New Testament, was the subject of textual criticism.
So am I.
And I am aware of the fact, for example, that we have scraps of John that would far predate 160 AD. There is absolutely, positively no evidence whatsoever that any of the New Testament documents were in existence in any way, shape, or form before the time of Christ.
You are
and
wrong.
If someone
in fact, you should watch our television show, the American Atheist Forum, which is shown here in Phoenix. We have a series coming up with John Allegro, who is one of the Dead Sea Scroll translators. He's one of the people who actually sat down and started piecing these documents together in the 1940s and 1950s, and he said he was astonished to find out that these documents that were 150 to 200 years older than anything that they had ever seen and predated the existence of Jesus by 100 to 150 years were almost identical to the New Testament. And this was the shocking revelation of the Dead Sea Scrolls, is that Christianity was nothing new. It was just the same old junk in a new form.
Steve, what is being referred to there is, as I'd like to refer you to such people as Drs. Estrada and White and Dr. Miller Burroughs, who is the worldwide expert on the Dead Sea Scrolls. What is being referred to there is the doctrine of the Essenes in reference to the teacher of righteousness. This has nothing to do with the New Testament documents themselves. There is absolutely no historical evidence whatsoever that the New Testament documents were not written by whom they claim to be written by at the times they claim to be written, since they were written before 78 AD. Obviously, someone who was alive in approximately 30 AD, around the time of the life of Jesus Christ, would only be 40 years older by the time they were written. So obviously there is not one bit of historical evidence whatsoever that would cause a non-biased individual to reject the authenticity of the New Testament text. There just isn't. It is based completely on the German rationalists of the past century. It has no archaeological evidence to it whatsoever. For example, the book of Acts is wonderfully historically accurate. It was obviously written by a contemporary of the things that were going on there, and any archaeological research into that area at that time demonstrates that this is so. And this can be examined. I can give you references. I can refer you to John Warwick Montgomery, History and Christianity. F.F. Bruce on New Testament documents reliable.
Yes, but you see, these people are all apologists for Christianity. They are not historians. They do not know what they're talking about. No, that is totally true, because these people are nothing but people who are trying to continually brainwash the people to accept a bunch of nonsense.
Notice, Steve, what we have to do now. When